Hey everyone, welcome back to another Housing 2.0 webinar. Now, before we get started, I wanted to remind you we are in the midst of National Tire Safety Week. In case you're planning to hit the road around the 4th of July holiday, make sure you check out those tires before you roll on down the highways and byways of America. Today we're embarking, see what I did there, on a new 5-part series that will look at housing uncertainties. Today's topic is managing high-performance certification uncertainty, including Energy Star and its uncertain future. Now, who better to lead us through this topic than Sam Rashkin, who is considered the father of Energy Star in the Zero Energy Ready Home program. Now, Sam is also the creator and teacher of the Housing 2.0 content, which is based largely on Sam's latest book, Housing 2.0, A Disruption Survival Guide. The full program was established to help empower you, our building professionals, to design and construct higher performance, healthier, more sustainable homes at a fraction of the cost. Now, so Sam's going to lead us through today's seminar, and he's also going to address your questions at the end. Now, before we get started, we need to make sure to recognize that this webinar is sponsored by Panasonic. Panasonic Healthy Indoor Living Solutions is helping builders across the country differentiate themselves with powerful, code-compliant, and cost-effective indoor air quality solutions that provide a safer environment for homebuyers. Now, like I said, during the course of today's presentation, you can submit questions for Sam. Simply use the Q&A function that's located in the menu bar near the bottom of the Zoom window. I'm going to review those questions and pose those to Sam after his presentation. All right, Sam, are you ready to roll?
Sure thing, Mike, and thanks everyone for showing up. Quick disclosure, today we're going to really look into big changes and announcement that happened to Energy Star and what it means to the entire high performance home stakeholder community. I want to warn you that before I begin, I'm giving you a perspective you're not going to hear anywhere else. I was in the trenches working in Energy Star. I have a certain view. I have to recommend that get lots of other opinions from people within the program, see what they think. But I tend to call it as I see it. And so I just let you know in advance, and I suspect that may provoke a lot of questions when we get to the end. So welcome to our first of the Managing Uncertainty series, this time with high performance home certification, likely changes and how to adapt. And of course, my biggest focus is Energy Star certified homes. So about the series, Managing Uncertainty, this is the first one, but there's a whole set that we had scheduled for this year. On August 21st, I'll look at the uncertainty with housing affordability. I want to really talk about 6 pillars for substantial cost savings with added value. It's remarkable to me that as we are rapidly approaching a cliff here, where I feel the bottom can fall out of the housing industry, that we can't continue to ignore these 6 pillars. And so that's going to be a very important session on August 21st. On September 11th, I want to address the uncertainty with the shrinking workforce. We have to start future-proofing our businesses, and we have to look at new options for how we build the labor. Our workforce situation's not going to get better, and we have to figure out what are the options with systems-built homes. That's on September 11th. On October 2nd, we'll talk about the uncertainties with homeowners' perceived value, particularly with high performance homes where the benefits are not visible. And we'll talk about 6 science-based strategies for how do you translate hidden value and make sure that high performance is fully recognized for all the benefits it brings to buyers. And then on November 13th, we'll talk about uncertainty with meeting growing expectations for house designs, and particularly how to integrate high performance homes with homes that live better. So that's going to be November 13th. And I want to also mention that we're in development of a series of in-person workshops for this year, where we'll bring to you the full Housing 2.0 fundamentals. So what are we going to do today? I always start with a Housing 2.0 background, just to give context for what I'm doing now, where a lot of these viewpoints are coming from. And then we'll jump into Energy Star and how it got here. Really critical. This program is remarkable. We really should understand the critical underpinnings that led to its success. Then I want to kind of dive into specifically Energy Star certified home how did it get on a path to market transformation? It was not an accident that it happened. I'd like to tell you that we knew what to do when we got there. I don't think I ever had bigger imposter syndrome than I accepted the position with EPA to lead the Energy Star Certified Home Program. But we got on a path and we learned a lot. And I want to share with you what I think we learned. And then some observations about the program today, likely changes I think that are happening with the new announcement to shut down the program, and then how do you adapt with what are the likely changes? So that's all in an hour. So if I move a little quickly, forgive me. I want to leave a lot of time for discussion at the end. So quickly, housing 2.0 background. Many of you may be familiar, some not. So just a quick introduction. What I believe is we have to recognize that housing is the ultimate consumer product. Nothing comes close. Nothing comes close in terms of emotion, cost, complexity, impact on our lives. Nothing is close. And if you look at where people spend time every day, at home, at work, dining, outdoors, vehicles, they spend 69% of their time in their homes based on research from the laboratory studies, national laboratory studies. That means virtually we are in our homes almost 70% of every day. So what I like to say is home is where life happens. That's such an important perspective. And if we look post-COVID, how many more people have started working at home? And maybe that percentage even gets up to 75%. So why Housing 2.0 is really kind of brought to you as a critical program. The reason we exist is we're about homes where life happens better. And it's great if homes are high performance, but there's so much more that we have to integrate with that performance. And what we do is we recognize performance is a must-have user experience, but it won't hold up the stool. In fact, it's a five-legged stool. There are five critical experiences. There's community, design, performance, quality, and sales, particularly sales service. And together, there's about 160 best practices we address that create these fundamentals for Housing 2.0, a framework for consistently providing homes that live better for lower cost. Now, how we do that is kind of a switch, a pivot from the first cost business model that's so common with builders to minimize all their costs, including costs devoted to user experience experts and special features, and kind of recommend highly that they make critical investments on sure thing user experiences that are almost transformational and make the extra investment there. So invest in user experience, but number two is critical. Optimize cost and user experience with a whole array of cost optimization pillars that, again, are the subject of another seminar. And the six pillars that I will address are the lean to minimize waste, simple to minimize complexity, systems integration, instead of having a lot of these systems as afterthought, quality, instead of high quality assurance expenses because we lack it, over customization going to a really optimized choice, and advanced productivity to minimize cycle time and process. So we're going to go from all these excessive costs to these optimized costs, and you wind up with these net savings and all this added value because of a better user experience and lower ownership cost. And what I'll suggest to you is I used to make a rough estimate that it was about a 30 to 50% cost advantage. But over time, those estimates have been coming to bear out. I'll give you one example. We've applied Housing 2.0 with a great builder working with the program, Tim O'Brien Homes. On the left, you see the original first floor plan. On the right, you see the optimized first floor plan. About 30 different optimization improvements were made to the original plan. I'm not going to walk you through all those, but what I will tell you is that one of the things we do with the builders is we tell them we can't manage what you don't measure. So go back to the office and run some spreadsheets. We give them tools to do that. And this is a spreadsheet and all the cost calculations and all the calculations for added value. And net $118,000 cost advantage just optimizing one element of Housing 2.0, optimized design, and it led to 46,000 in cost savings and 72,000 in added value that come up to this 118,000 number. So these are real, now more and more as we work with builders, we are validating these estimates are really bankable for many builders. So enough about Housing 2.0. If you're interested, this is the key resource, the book. It's been vetted for years and years with hundreds and hundreds of housing executives, a tremendous amount of content that's helpful. And the goal is just to make sure the high performance housing professionals have the best position to be industry leaders. So enough about Housing 2.0. Let's move into today's topic, Energy Star, and first, how it got here. So what's really important to recognize and why I'm doing this webinar is Energy Star is really important. And I hope everyone really understands just how profoundly impactful this program is. It is one of the most outstanding examples of really, really great government. That's why we're here. We really need to understand this program. And as you will learn from me, also understand what could be continuously improved. Okay, I think there are a lot of ways to take Energy Star and enhance from where it is today to where it can go. Now let's start with first, how did it get here? And look at four compelling aspects, I think, that create the success that this program has had. One is leadership, one is a compelling why, one is a compelling what, and a compelling how. And so we'll cover each of those before we get into specifically Energy Star certified home. So I want to start with the leadership. And I am really frustrated that when I go and I search on John Hoffman, there's one greeny picture is the only picture I can find of John Hoffman. It's just stunning to me that this amazing leader has hardly any presence left on the web. This is the equivalent of Steve Jobs to Apple, what John Hoffman did leading the Energy Star program. He ensured the right destination in terms of what we could really achieve and inspire us to just what was possible with really good government programs. And he brought in an incredible array of people into this program and went all across the country and with amazing sense of very specifically what skills he wanted in this program. He got them in an incredible recruitment effort. He developed amazing messaging. His speaking and his enthusiasm were inspirational, and he scared the heebie-jeebies out of all of us. I mean, you knew you'd be fired if you didn't meet these insanely aggressive thresholds for performance that were set out for all of us coming into this program. This was like joining a startup company. But the incredible experience for all of us to work with this man was stunning. And when he left, very shortly after I got there, within a year and a half, that was a huge loss to the program that it never, I think, got over. I think the insane innovation, ability to pivot, to do and take risks and do things, that kind of dropped tremendously. Leadership is everything in an organization. Now, the groups that have come in have done a great job managing the program and his vision. But the kind of continuous innovation that I think John would have brought probably never happened. This man was amazing. Everyone should know him. There's been some good write-ups about him in some books, but I want to make sure first everyone knows this is where I think I learned the most in my entire experience as a working professional was working for John Hoffman. Okay, now the compelling why. And it was so clear what this program was set out to do. It was voluntary, first and foremost, climate protection. And I think climate protection was the name of the division, the climate protection division, I think purposely, because climate change, even then, there's always some debate and polarization around climate change, but we could all rally around, we should protect the ecosystem we live in, and we shouldn't be regulated was a big aspect to this program. We could do it voluntarily. We don't have to mandate a worldview and tell you what to do. This was so compelling to me. Three words. If you ever attend my training, I teach, you have to lead with the why. Simon Sinek's great concept. And I attach 7 words as kind of the threshold that you should use for any compelling why. So this for me is what it is. It's not what's in the program literature. You won't find it, but this is what I believe. Voluntary climate protection. And it's just amazing what the program did. What did it do? Okay, so why it did it was voluntary protection. What it did was it provided a simple choice for products, credibly certified, energy efficient, and the absolute critical part without compromise. If you saw an Energy Star product, you knew that it not only was efficient, but performed as good or better than standard products, and it was certified. Okay, there's so much literature about the value of the concept of being certified, and I just won't go into all that. But this was such a compelling product product to bring to the market from government, and again, really great, good government. So this was the logo. This is what we did. Now, how did we do it? I'll spend a little more time on the how because here's where I fear a lot of lessons could be lost. As so many of us, the talent across this program I was so intimidated almost the first 4 or 5 years that I belonged there. And a lot of us are kind of all in different directions now. And there's so much history and wisdom and knowledge and lessons learned that I hate to think might be lost. And I'll share with you where I think mine are. And it has to do with how we were successful. It was the right people, the right discipline, the right business model, the right change strategy, and the right collaboration. So let's go into the right people. I mentioned earlier that John Hoffman was amazing. He had a vision and he knew it needed an army of incredibly skilled professionals to come in. And people didn't, having skills was not enough. He also recruited this amazing passion for having huge impact making our world better. And he brought in MBAs and engineers and industry professionals and sales professionals and communications professional and one architect. I know that because I was the architect in the program. But this, just the atmosphere working there just was energized like nothing I'd ever felt before in my life because these people were so inspiring to each other. So that was the first thing he did. That was he got the right people on the bus, to use James Collins' words from Good to Great. But that was so powerful. You don't have a program without having the right people on the bus. And then the discipline to understand what we do, what was our lane, and stay in that lane. And what our lane was we certified products that were generally in the top 25% most efficient within a specific product type. We made sure they provided, again, the same or better performance as standard models. Remember the early compact fluorescent light bulbs? They flickered, they hummed, they were noisy, they failed prematurely. There was so much disappointment. People dropped them so quickly when they were first introduced because they didn't meet the performance of the incandescent light bulb that we all used. John understood you had a warranty back up that the performance was as good as better or better, as well as be more efficient. Third, to achieve that, all the products were independently tested and verified compliant with the threshold set by the program. Fourth, you would only certify products if they were readily available and not limited to 1 or 2 niche manufacturers. So there are some products that never got labeled that asked to be labeled because there was only one provider. And the last thing here was that the products had to have clear and accurate energy savings and benefits labels that were attached to them, just to make sure that we translated the value at the point of sale. Now, one note is that, of course, these specifications were reviewed and updated on a regular basis to encourage ongoing improvement. So we were so disciplined. And what happened is eventually, I think some of the discipline there gets lost. And I'll speak a little bit about that later on. And then we had the right business model. It's all about being in partnership with industry. We're going to leverage mutual benefits. You get something powerful, we get something powerful. So in the case of the partner, they would make changes that enhanced their business interests. And not in terms that were foreign to them. We learned the business metrics they use, the business challenges and problems that they had to solve. We came to them with solutions, and EPA enhanced climate protection. That's what made us feel great. We were tabulating the way McDonald's counts the number of hamburgers sold. We always had a counter going on how much carbon we kept out of the atmosphere. But we were just enhancing the climate. So those are our mutual benefits. Then what was really powerful was then what do you do to actually execute change? Do you have the right strategy to make change happen? And the Energy Star program did something that I later would come on to learn more what was really going on that I understood intuitively, more consciously when I read Switch by Chip and Dan Heath. What we did that was so powerful was build on what's working. Okay, I think they call those bright spots. And so within our program, we had set up a bright spot, if you will. And before Energy Star had any mass effort, it was just in the background. I had come out in 92 to label computers that went to sleep. And then, a lot of us got there in 94, 95. And the idea was Energy Star needed to be expanded. It was, like I said, in the background, most of the effort that John was focused on was a program called Green Lights. And what was so incredible about having green lights was we all got there right surrounding us, and just the energy from that program you could almost touch, because it was creating change so fast with so much energy, so much growth in real time. And what they were doing was so powerful yet so simple. They went to their voluntary partners and they asked, this is the proposition. They said, all we want you to do is get a lighting expert to inventory your building and your lighting systems. And then when they do that kind of audit or assessment, to calculate the cost to make changes and the savings with efficient fixtures and controls. And then all we want you to do is, if your own expert and their assessment reveal that by changing your fixtures and controls, you can make a 20% or greater after-tax internal rate of return, you do that. And what business would turn down an after-tax 20% internal rate of return? So it was just, we spoke their language. We asked them to do, we knew that lighting was just crazy cost effective. So let's just get people to do the obvious that they weren't seeing, because it was prior to that not being conveyed in the language they understood. And the partner benefits were this compelling return on investment for their companies by making these upgrades, and all this recognition for doing amazing things and excellence from the trusted US Environmental Protection Agency. And we were so envious. The 100 of us or so that got there, while this program was running full tilt, Maria Vargas, a good friend, was leading the program. I was so envious of her running a mature program that was just crushing it. Amazing results. I go, when will we ever see this kind of success? But we had that example right in front of us. We can see that we could take what was working at a level like you've never seen in federal government in a voluntary program, and we can maybe figure out how to apply it to our products that we were assigned to. And Green Lights eventually, of course, became Energy Star Buildings, which to me is probably, from my view, the most successful Energy Star program. But this was the precedence that was there for us to build upon, a template, if you will. So Energy Star just applied what's working. It was the right implementation. We built on what's working, and we developed a very effective way of figuring out how to go to partners, say, look, all we want you to do is take your products and verify they are efficient in performance to the threshold. Just take all your products and figure out which ones meet this energy efficient and performance threshold. Then label those products Energy Star at no cost. Use this label, and promote Energy Star per the logo use guidelines that were developed. So you had really good control that partners weren't abusing the label, and we could manage the use of the label. So that was the deal. And the partner got this significant differentiation for products that were probably the highest profit margin products they sold, the more efficient, higher quality products. And they sold more products that created higher customer satisfaction. And they increased sales by earning trust, that they had a certification to the label products, all this recognition, and many, many of them over time won awards that help create even more trust. So this was just a very powerful program construct of how we applied a lot of the concepts that were working with the Green Lights program. And then we had the right collaboration. Now, John was just a militant about engaging industry. And you had to be an active listener, just constantly going to potential partners and learning their business. So we did an amazing amount of customer discovery. We engaged them with tremendous amount of effort to be involved in setting the national program requirements and always understanding their constraints and the opportunities and knowing their business so well that we would avoid poison pills. We can figure out how to stage requirements over time. We went to the industry events. We showed up. Woody Allen said 80% of success is showing up. We always showed up. All of us, a lot of us, well, most of us had these incredible travel schedules that John knew to add to the budget money for travel. And then we also, along the way, really worked hard to develop personal relationships, the kind that you need to truly get inside and understand the industry. So that was critical to making it happen. So those are some of the key underpinnings. Again, there's so many amazing people in this program. You'll get other perspectives from them. But those are some top of mind ones I want to share. There was so much, the leadership created such a foundation for this program to be successful. So what path to market transformation did Energy Star Certified Home take? This is the one I know more detail because I led this program up until I left to work at DOE in 2011. So I mentioned to you I had incredible imposter syndrome, like at a level like I can't tell you. I did not believe I belonged in this organization. These people intimidated me. I had expectations like I've never had bestowed on me in any job before. I was freaking out. And so I went to every resource I could and read tons of book about just how do markets work and how do you get innovations to market. And probably one of the best that clarified for me, and not until several years after I was frustrated trying to figure things out, a book by Geoffrey Moore called Inside the Tornado. Crossing the Chasm was his first book, but this book was like an aha. It was like a complete aha moment for me because it finally helped clarify that the classic market diffusion curve you've seen thousands of times if you're like me going and reading literature and going to presentations where you see basically very, very slow growth as you get only early adopters on board and you figure out how to get to the mainstream users and then you slow down because you've got most of the users and the laggards finally come on board. So this is a standard market diffusion curve. And vertical axis shows how much penetration in the market you get. So the key thing that is great in the book is it explains that the behavior profiles of the early adopter and the mainstream user couldn't be more diametrically different. The early adopter is unique. They accept cost and value propositions that are where they have to gamble on the future rewards, but they understand the value proposition and accept it, and they'll take the gamble. They accept high friction. They'll form cliques if they need to figure things out. And they'll deal with complicated transactions, and they accept uncertainty. They're venturesome, cope with things that they aren't clear when they're using the product, and don't worry about setbacks. And this is me curating Inside the Tornado into these three buckets of critical scaling factors to get anything to market: cost, value, friction, and and uncertainty. And when you look at the behavior profile of a mainstream user, it's the complete opposite. They reject any cost value proposition that is not intuitive to them, or they're not going to make the effort to figure it out. They're very discreet about new ideas. They reject high friction. They want whole product solutions, simple transactions, and they don't want any uncertainty. They know a certain way, and that's the way they like to go. So they'll deliberate forever. If it's new, they'll resist anything that's not clear. They want proven solutions. Couldn't be more different. And because of that, this is a myth that you smoothly transition to these users. And what Geoffrey Moore points out is there's a chasm. The reality is no smooth curve, and you've got to cross that chasm between the early adopter mainstream user. And if you don't, you flatline. You never penetrate the market at a meaningful level, and you don't scale. So this is what we focus on in the program. I realized later, once I read this book, but we were intuitively doing a lot of things right. But by then having this clarity, when I went to Zero Energy Ready Home, it was a completely different confidence level I had leading that program. So this is critical. And so here's what we did across the chasm for the Energy Star certified home. On cost value, the most significant thing, we shrunk the change. We knew we had to do that, or at least I did, because when I got there, I'll show you what I had to struggle with. Less significant, but really important for dealing with costs, we developed a sampling protocol. Ones in red, I'm going to focus more on. On friction, there's just 5 of us or 6 of us working on the program in Washington could not run a national supply chain for the program. So we needed a supply chain. And we also need easy partnership and easy access to resources. And we developed a one-stop shop for verification with the HERS rater and made that as simple as we could. On uncertainty, we really got good at translating the value better and better over time, maybe not so good in the beginning. And we use the Geoffrey Moore concept called the bowling alley to do the proof of concept. I'll explain that more. And then we had the Building America program, which I'll also speak to in a moment. And then also to remove uncertainty, we really got prescriptive packages. So you, as a builder, you know the worst case, what you had to do in absence of the HERS rating during your consideration to join or not join the program. Now, the rating industry fought us like insanely rigorously to not do sampling and not do the prescriptive packages, but they were nascent, they were trying to grow, they were fearful of anything that would reduce the business opportunity for them. And so this was just a lot of conflict we had with that industry, with the HERS industry, that we had to get past. But what we knew, I spent 3-4 months when I got there, just traveling the country, talking to builders, because I had no clue what was their primary problem they had to solve. And what I learned about builders, because I really didn't have as much as I hoped to have coming into this job, but one is the top priority is land acquisition. I mean, it is so far above anything else that they care about. And so anything else is such a small priority to them relative to getting the land. If they don't have the land, they don't have a product to sell. And they have a very low risk, variable cost business model. They don't own anything in construction. They have an office and they develop the concepts for the designs, but everything's outsourced in construction. All the aspects of construction go to subcontractors, incredibly fragmented. There are tens of thousands of builders across the country. And we all know that they're like the inertia in that industry. The risk and friction tolerance is ultra, ultra low. So this is what, a little sobering, going around traveling the country and then trying to figure out, okay, what can we do to solve problems these guys really have? So I mentioned we're going to cover some of these things in detail, some of these elements. And the first one to talk about is shrinking the change. When I got to EPA, there's a team of great group of experts that were working in the back room, cobbling together a potential performance threshold for the Energy Star certified home. And they gave me this when I got there, first day to lead the national program. And I kind of flipped out because even before I did my 3 months of travel, I said, I can't sell this. It's great. It was basically the EBA guidelines that were out in 93, 94. kind of converted into a program specification. But it was the HERS 6575 equivalent would be about a IECC 2009 home, an enclosure. Third-party verification made sense, but with who? We had 5, 6 people. We were going to go certify thousands of homes. Tight ducts and air sealing, comprehensive air barriers, efficient components, bulk moisture management, quality installation, HVAC. Those are all great. I couldn't disagree with what they gave me. What I couldn't figure out is how we can get it to market. 100% of nothing is still nothing. So we shrunk the change. What we did was eventually, and a lot of this was again, John Hoffman, just providing amazing leadership and helping us figure out a level. We talked about all these issues, and he just is so quick to come up with solutions and really help. But what we did basically is we were 30% greater than the code at the time, which was woefully inefficient. The MEC 93 code compared to the latest IECC codes, about 70% less efficient. So we're 30% more efficient than that, but that's today a pretty low bar. We emphasize tight ducts and air sealing, and HERS verification was the big one. We couldn't do verification, and the only thing out there was this nascent HERS rating. I'll call it an industry, but it was a guy in Indianapolis. There was a woman in Mississippi, and there was a guy in Salt Lake City, and you were done. Steve Baden was up in Alaska with a program, but we weren't working in Alaska. And so there was no HERS industry. And we hitched our wagon to it because we know we needed verification. And Dave Lee, who eventually became a residential branch chief, was so effective at managing and leading what I believe was the development of an industry that would not have happened but for him. But Dave Lee was there, and he was the major reason the HERS verification infrastructure developed in my mind. But that's what we were. And that was even this change that was shrunk to such a small level. It took us 10 years before we can go to the next step to get that fully established. In 2006, we introduced Energy Star Certified Home version 2. And what you see is where I have a darker shade of brown, it means that was an increase in rigor, or in some cases, the additional boxes, it was new requirements. So we made the HERS threshold about 85 instead of 100. We went to the 2006 IECC as the baseline for the enclosure. We had more rigor on the ducts and air sealing requirements, but the big prize in this second version was thermal bypass checklist, because without the air barriers, the insulation can work barely effectively. And so we made sure finally we had a complete thermal bypass checklist and more efficient Energy Star components. And then came version 3, and we finally got to the full package and even better. So we have now a HERS 6575 baseline to a 2009 enclosure. We also had tighter ducts and air sealing, and we added bulk moisture management, knowing how much more risky assemblies get when they get more airtight and more insulated. And we added quality installation of HVAC with whole house ventilation. And then I jumped to Zero Ready Home, and we went even more. We were able to go to a HERS 48 to 55. We baselined to 2015, now 2021. We made even tighter ducts and tighter air sealing requirements, more Energy Star components than Energy Star. And we added optimized ducts location inside the conditioned space predominantly. We added indoor air plus, so wellness was requirement, knowing that these homes were tighter and needed a comprehensive indoor air quality package. And we added solar ready, seeing ahead that solar costs were coming down, that for a minor additional little set of details, you could make the house able to have solar installed with minimum disruption or cost penalty to the owner. So that was how we took a path to this goal, based on market readiness, constant customer discovery, talking to builders, understanding where we could, when and how we could push the program requirements and where we had tolerance for the change. So that's how we basically moved it forward. And then the supply chain was critical, having a really clear roles for everything to be done. So we provided the product, which was basically just we set the bar. Here's how high, you got to jump and then you get a label. So our product was the Energy Star label tied to a threshold. And then we need distribution, which is predominantly the HERS providers. But in a number of cases, utilities were helpful or institutional programs. On Salesforce and verification, completely relied on HERS raters, which was a big gamble. And I can't appreciate more the amazing work that David Lee did, making sure that happened because I was flubbing lots of issues with the HERS raters. And then we had core customer we knew was our builders. We were B2B. That's how we operated. We had to get the builders to use a label, or there was no home with our label to purchase. They were the ones we had to sell. And then they sold to the end customer, the home buyers. So this was the clear roles we understood. This is where we spent our time, was to build the supply chain. And translating value, we knew each of those key parts of the supply chain required different messaging. The raters were giving them an opportunity to create a viable business and to grow a national market. Utilities, we were there to help you reduce peak demand. Instead of having to come up with your own program, here's a turnkey program. And if you want an exit strategy, we were there for persistence. The Energy Star wasn't going to go away. If whatever support you provided left, everyone could keep going. There'd be persistence because the national program was there for the builders you brought into the program. Then the big message was you're going to earn trust with your customers because you're a certified home. Big deal. You're going to differentiate. You're in the top 10% of the homes in the country able to meet this very high threshold of efficiency and performance set by the US EPA, and you're going to have much higher customer satisfaction. And those became the core messages. No, we weren't selling energy efficiency. And I'll be in endless debates with even my internal colleagues about that. Energy efficiency had nothing to do with the sale for us and for me personally. And for home buyers, basically all you have to do, look for the label. It's certified efficient plus it meets and exceeds what other homes are doing. And it's lower ownership costs. That's all we basically messaged. So we really focus on this value. And then we had to cross the chasm. And I mentioned I was going to talk about the bowling alley strategy from Geoffrey Moore. And essentially, what he explained is there's usually an 800-pound gorilla that dominates a market. And if you're coming in with a new innovation, you have to figure out how do you get and be competitive and create transformation. And so a good example might be, Oracle dominates databases and you have a new database. You can't just throw out another database and expect people to just to go to the new one. It's too much already built in preference and use of, let's say, Oracle. So what you do is you go it's like a bowling alley. You go to the first pin, the first application, the first segment in that application. Let's say medical industry, health industry. And for small doctor's offices, you already pre-develop a database that knows how to do billing, to keep records, to do notifications and so forth. And then you go for larger offices and then hospitals are segment 2 and segment 3. And then if you have success there and people know your database, you go to Act 2, which might be, let's say, education sector. And you come up with segment 1 for small schools. You come up with ways of doing attendance and records and keeping notices and curriculum. And then for segment 2 might be universities. And you keep knocking pins over from a single beachhead, and you accelerate adoption and a foothold, and you keep switching strategies once you're in the tornado to keep gaining market share. So that's what we did with Energy Star Certified Home. I'd say the first 4 or 5 months, I was visiting Gainesville, California, and Florida, like I think 3, 4 times, maybe more. I lost track. Here's a small city of 30,000 homes. We're trying to start a national program of 30,000 people. We're trying to start a national program. I'm going back and forth to Gainesville, Florida. Why? because they had all the elements of what was critical to success for Energy Star sort of at home. And we needed a proof of concept of what we were doing didn't work there. The messaging, the messaging, the how we provided low friction, how we got rid of uncertainty. If all the solutions we had for those things didn't work there, we knew we had a problem. So we had Ken Fonero with Florida Hero. Probably we owe so much to Ken. I don't know where he is today, but Ken was passionate. He was incredible. He was engaged with the builders in the market. We had a very good quality builder base there because of university town, and they tended to sell to a more educated demographic. They had a good utility, didn't want to offer incentives, which I didn't want anyway, but they were really, really helpful, engaging the industry and hosting training and doing lots of things that I really wanted. And we grew market share to about 30% of the market in that one small market, just because we had all the pieces we needed. So then we met Darren Waschek in Phoenix, and we grew Phoenix, and we met another Raider in Las Vegas who was amazing. We grew Las Vegas. And so those are the regional builders. And that was our first segment we were going after. Then we go after the national builders, and we made inroads with Pulte. And then by 2006, I think we got KB Home going 100%. And then we worked with the Systems Building Research Alliance and my good buddy Emmanuel Levy, and we figured out HUD code. We had Palm Harbor go 100% Energy Star. We were just knocking the pins down. But I would be remiss if I didn't say we were incredibly lucky. The Building America program came along. New homes was hard. There were a lot of, the industry, the HERS industry was really hard to build a solid infrastructure. And so Building America came along in the first few years of the program, and they said, let's set up these three amazing teams, Steve Burke and Stephen Winters and Ibicus, and I think there was one other, but they all went out and started working with big builders, showing them how to do Energy Star for very little cost. And they did hundreds and hundreds of homes. We exempted them from the rating process so they could do a lot of homes very quickly. And then all of a sudden we created, through that, a lot of interest in the program. So Building America was like huge in terms of the success of the program. And a lot of time we're talking about here, lessons learned, is collective impact. This is a great study from Stanford University about how you get big social change. And it requires broad cross-sector coordination, but recognizing that that's a challenge because everyone's isolated and you have all these individual organizations doing their own thing. So you need these five elements. You need some backbone support organization that kind of herds the cats, if you will. And you need a common agenda you can all agree upon. This is where we're going. This is the destination, and we're going to agree on these specifications, whatever it may be. You need continuous communication, and then you need mutually reinforcing activities that everyone knows that their role and what they're doing, and a shared measurement system. So here's how we applied that with Energy Star Home. We were the backbone support group, our program. We provided the agenda, the partnership agreements, and the national program requirements. And we were just really aggressive with communication. We showed up everywhere, as I mentioned, extensive outreach, and then all these mutually reinforcing activities kind of were able to be engaged and to kind of set up so that they brought tremendous complement to our program. So the HERS rating infrastructure, the Building America program I mentioned, the utility institutional programs, and the code programs. And I'll talk more about that in a second. And we had a shared measurement system, the HERS rating, the number of certified homes, and we had conversion factors for what were the impacts the program was having on dollar savings, energy savings, emission savings, all those, we could all rally around these numbers. And the result was scaling, over 3 million certified homes today. And most importantly, it accelerated the rigor of the national energy codes. And I'll more about that in a second. Right now. So Here are the annual certifications for Energy Star in light blue and the cumulative certifications. Again, you see this kind of this smooth curve that we had because we crossed the chasm. This is the classic, again, variation of that innovation curve that I showed you happening for our program. And so the key thing, though, is what I want to do is overlay on this growth curve the code changes. So on the left, you have millions of homes being certified. On the right, you have the energy use index. 100's pegged to 1975 code, and 40 is kind of where the latest codes are getting to. But what you see basically is in lockstep with our growth, we were able to go from the 2006 IECC to 2009 to 2012, 15, 18, 21. And effectively, these latest codes are used as baseline for the Zero Energy Ready Home program because they're zero energy ready enclosure worthy. In other words, the worst home allowed by law as all these states keep adopting these latest codes, the worst home allowed by law is zero ready, at least in terms of the enclosure. So really powerful what happened in market transformation. When you have millions of homes, hundreds of thousands of homes, tens of thousands of homes, voluntarily building to these much more rigorous specifications than the current code, the code process has a hard time saying those more rigorous specifications are not cost effective. And so the process is empowered to adopt these higher levels because of the empirical evidence of the growth of the Energy Star program. Okay, so I covered the history. I want to spend time because, again, I don't want these lessons learned to be lost. And I caution again, it's my perspective, talk to as many of the amazing people that have worked in the program and left and that are still there. So some observations, and here's where I get a lot of concern because I talk about things as I see them, not because I'm trying to be judgmental or critical, but as opportunities to continuously improve. So the first thing you have to recognize is the diminishing returns baked into the success of the program. So here's an example with Energy Star dishwashers. In 1996, the average consumption was 1,200 kilowatt hours a year, and an Energy Star dishwasher, on average, would use 600 kilowatt hours a year. So you had 600 kilowatt hours of savings in dark brown. Today, a typical dishwasher now is down to 450 kilowatt hours per year, and an Energy Star dishwasher saves you 150. It consumes about 300. So you have 4 times less energy savings, emission savings, carbon savings, cars off the road savings. Everything's 4 times lower as you get more success. Okay, and also the number, remember I said we target the top 25% most efficient. In 2025, well, now the market share for dishwashers that are Energy Star are over 75%. Now I'm getting a lot of this from AI queries I've been doing. And so I think these numbers, if even they're slightly off, if you had the actual EPA statistics, which I hope they're based on, the story will be the same. And when I take this to Energy Star certified homes, the diminishing returns are even greater. Diminishing returns are even greater. So, and I'm going to say, I believe this chart is way understating how much the savings have shrunk because, again, I've gotten the annual kilowatt hours used per house, total energy use from AI query, and it was about 15,000 for 1993 mech house, and the Energy Star home would save you about, it was 15,000. So Energy Star home would save you about 5,000. It would be about 10,000. So you were saving 5,000 kilowatt hours when the program began. Today, a 2021 IECC home consumes about 10,000 kilowatt hours, and an Energy Star home would save you 10%, 11% of that. So you've shrunk the savings about 5 times since the program launch. And again, it's just observing that the prize keeps shrinking, but the program size is the same, even more people working there maybe. You're getting less return per investment as a product of the success of the program. Now, when we look at these diminishing returns, I'm going to suggest, I know there's a lot of horror and shock that the program's up for whether it continues or not, but maybe, just maybe, there's an option that every government program or element of a program doesn't continue in perpetuity. There might be an opportunity where you go, you know what, we declare a victory. Or if not, shut down the program, you figure out how to optimize it so there is greater impact. And I'm not saying to shut down the program, but I'm saying, it's important to sound reasonable. And if the return on investment keeps shrinking, you have to keep looking at other options or ways to add more value. Now, so this leads me to these recommendations to address diminishing returns for continuous improvement. These are some opportunities I'll throw out there. You maintain the high value products. I mentioned earlier, I believe Energy Star Buildings is incredible because what we learned from my colleagues when I worked there is that how a building's operated is more important than the efficiency with which it's built. In a commercial building, the operations is more impact than the energy efficient construction of the building. And so what portfolio manager does is it gives us powerful tool for seeing the effects of how a building's operated relative to comparable buildings of that type, or you can have a fleet of buildings and compare all your buildings and see which are the energy hogs and which are the energy stars and figure out what to learn from the energy efficient ones that can be applied to the energy hogs. And every year you got to earn your medal. The Energy Star label for buildings is earned every year. And so you're constantly being tasked to deliver that operations efficiency every year. It's just a great program. So that's why I would call, if everything goes, this is one program I hope they find a way, you got to keep this program. And then you want to declare victory, as I suggested maybe, where significant transformation happens. They've already done it with light bulbs, but I'll suggest that for a couple of years now, virtually the only light bulb on the shelves at Home Depot or Lowe's have been LEDs. And it took until December last year before they sunset the Energy Star label for light bulbs. But I think there are going to be lots of opportunities if we look at all the products that we're labeling. Maybe there are others that we can plan a sunset strategy for them as well. Do we need to do everything in perpetuity? And then what we need to do is sunset the low value products. I don't know why we label insulation. I queried and asked why we were doing it when it was being developed. I'm not a big believer personally in next gen home. I don't think it's in our lane. It just doesn't work the same way. It's just not following, I think, the core proposition of what Energy Star does. And more importantly, I think it's just a hard one to translate the value of in the marketplace. My opinion. Okay, others love it, and you have to weigh all the reasons, and we can have debates and discussion. But those are the examples for me of maybe there are some parts of what we're doing that add less value, the lower value. Okay, next comment is increasing burden and complexity. So this is the spec for Energy Star version 1.0 that I showed you that we put out there. Basically 30% greater than code performance. And then you had the verification, and we focused heavily in duct sealing. Good buddy Mark Madera was developing air seal at the time, and he'd done a lot of research brought to our attention that showed just how disturbing the duct leakage was across the board in new and existing construction. So we really went after duct sealing quite a bit. And then we threw on 2 extra encouragements into the spec just to make it a little more full out. We added homeowner education and whole house approach. So that was it. And you look at Energy Star today, and the stunning complexity, and I'm going to suggest possibly burden, it just has gone up exponentially from my view, but I'm not in the trenches, so we need to talk to the guys there and see if there are opportunities or not. But you see that there are 3 sets of program requirements currently, 3.1, 2, and 3. The national measures, there is a design review checklist, a rate of field checklist, an HVAC design supplement, an HVAC design report, an HVAC commissioning checklist. And then you have all these various versions, including for the Pacific program for Hawaii and other islands in the Caribbean. And you have programs for California, which has a zero energy code. And so you have you have all this complexity of the program. And then this is the national program requirements for 3.1. So those are all things you got to do. These are all, and what point I want to make about this is I always get nervous with complexity is that you don't recognize innovation. Do we really need air leakage testing for my friends who make this prefabricated concrete panel system or SIP homes? I mean, I got to struggle to find a SIP home that is above 1.5 ACH 50. And most of these programs, 3 is going to be good for almost any market you're in. They're like almost double the efficiency of a standard SIP home or insulated concrete panel home or a lot of these panel systems. Can't we just exempt them from air leakage testing? Or if you use the RIA duct system, it's plug and play. It takes the installer out of the equation. You snap it together airtight, and when you stretch it out, you get really good airflow. Can we eliminate the RIA duct systems from all this HVAC quality installation requirements that are substantial? And what about if you have automated fault detection and diagnostics, the old Sensi Predict? That should have got an exemption. Now, so little people use it. Emerson doesn't still manufacture the Sensi Predict. And I can go on and on. There are all these innovations that should be in the speed of business, be exempted, I believe, because we want to encourage those innovations. We want to give them maybe a little extra wiggle room and take a little risk so those innovations can get to market. But this kind of detail blocks them out. It doesn't allow the innovations, and it's also a burden for everyone to figure out, understand. This is the radar review checklist you got to do. This is the radar design review checklist notes. Then you have the HVAC design report, which is really pretty detailed and rigorous. I suggest burdensome for people involved. And then you have the HVAC design report notes, and it looks more like a regulation than a voluntary program right now. And then you have the HVAC design report you have to do on top of this. So you kind of get my point. Why don't we just at least take a shot at saying, is there opportunities to minimize all the burden, all the complexity in the construct of the program right now? Now, my belief is if you know the duct system is sized by a credible professional, and if you actually very in good detail inspect the duct layout in the house and make sure no kinks, no bends, no sagging, excessive length. If everything's going per the design and without the installation defects that constrain or add to static pressure, do we need to do all these other testings that we're doing? Can we rely on standard refrigerant charge testing? I'm just asking the question and saying, do we have to have all this complexity? And can we exempt the innovations like I mentioned, RIA, SIPs, automated fault detection diagnostic, concrete panels, and others? And should we consider shedding low-value segments? Do we really need to have the label active in markets with a zero energy code like California, or really rigorous codes like Massachusetts, or stretch codes like Massachusetts, in Vermont, and Oregon, and Maine, and city of Boulder has almost a zero energy ready code? Do we really, because all you're doing is creating free riders. Now, homes in those markets get the same 45L tax credit that the builders have to work much, much harder and spend more to do in states and cities without these rigorous codes. So we create a lot of extra burden on the tax base because we're giving these credits in markets that it takes so little to get them, or almost nothing. And a low value segment might be, do we need Energy Star in the Caribbean and Pacific Islands? The program was designed to address primarily enclosure issues and primarily the HVAC issues. And these Caribbean and Pacific Islands, they're 75 degrees in winter, they're 85 degrees in summer. It's the windows, it's the attic insulation, it's efficient duct, efficient HVAC. those markets can come up with their own much more simple program and avoid also the 45L tax credit going to places where the return on investment for the tax credit in terms of the savings from business as usual will be much greater. So I just ask the questions, maybe I'm wrong, but at least I want to know that we're studying and with rigor the opportunities and we make decisions based on our findings. And just to show you continuous improvement applied, the first time in my life I didn't have imposter syndrome was when I got to DOE, and part of my job was zero energy ready home. I studied so much all these books on scaling and change, and I spent so much time documenting lessons learned. I knew we could do this program more efficiently if I could start from scratch. So we went from 5 PY for Energy Star certified home, dark brown, zero energy ready home, light brown, to 0.5 PY. So it's half of my time was about zero energy ready home, no other staff. We went from 5 PY because I knew everything to do and I just outsourced everything to the contractors. And yet the budget went down from 1.5 million to $500,000. And we were getting tremendous impacts on almost everything we did by being more efficient. We used the HERS registry instead of spending like $1 million to come up with a registry, because now we had that tool available to use the HERS registry. We didn't do the Energy Star Awards in DC. We did them at EBA, where 500 or 600 housing professionals would see our zero ready home Housing Innovation Award winners and clap for them, rather than just 3 of the builders coming to DC and with no other builders in the audience. And not only that, we had we were able to use the application for the awards to generate the zero energy ready home tour of zero and showcase all the testimonials and the savings and benefits. So we were really getting so much more efficient and so much more optimized because we had no budget and we had no staff, and we had to really learn from what we were doing. So my suspicion is there's lots of room to be more efficient and better. So we wrap up now with basically a quick summary of the likely changes and how do we adapt. So the 3 things that are 3 key options for how things will change are: first, number 1, that EPA continues the Energy Star program. Either the policy to sunset the program is reversed, or industry and non-NGOs are successful lobbying to keep Energy Star program at EPA. So one option is EPA continues the Energy Star program. The second option is, per the current policy announcement, to EPA shutters the Energy Star program, but it will continue operating by maybe transitioning it to DOE or having it privatized. So it may be shuttered, but continue operating. And the third option for change is that the Energy Star program discontinues. What everyone needs to do is relax. There's no specific date set for the shutdown yet. And so, but we know basically one of these 3 things will happen, but no one knows precisely. So just to make life simple for you, just let's keep it clear. These are the 3 options. Okay, so how do we adapt to each of those options? Well, if EPA continues Energy Star because of successful change in policy or intervention, continue working with the program. It's one of the most amazing examples of good government. But I really want to stress what an opportunity we have, I think, for continuous improvement. Cost, waste, burden, complexity, innovation exemptions, and shedding low value segments. I think if we learn anything, the more defensible we can make the program, I think the more persistent we can make the program. If number 2 happens, if EPA shutters Energy Star, but it transitions to DOE or it's privatized, support and work with the new implementer, and look again for continuous improvement opportunities, because we want persistence. And if Energy Star discontinues, find alternatives to high performance homes. It's better for business. You can always use the Energy Star certified home specs to distinguish your homes. They're in the public domain, and if you meet and exceed those specifications, that's always something you can claim to. Or you can just use a percent above code as an alternative. Or let's use a more compelling metric. Instead of 0 to 100 and 100 plus, what people react more emotionally to, what they understand already, what requires no education, is if you get an A, it's great. If you get an F, you need to be really upset. Or 1 to 5 stars. No, none of us want to do business or buy a product that's a 1 or 2 star product or service. A lot of us will filter for 4 or 5 stars. The HERS rating, when it first came out, was a 5-star rating. They were ahead of their times, but it got dropped in favor of the 0 to 100 scale as the only metric. And I'm saying, let's make high performance more compelling by making it emotional. No one wants to have a house that gets an F or a D, and we love to brag if we get an A in something, or we understand we're really in trouble if our house is 1 or 2 stars and really excited for 4 or 5 stars. Let's leverage what people react emotionally to, and let's translate value more effectively, not rely on incentives. 45L is in a very fragile position right now for continuation. And if instead of always being reliant on that tax incentive, but really on the value proposition that's so superior for high performance, we're better off. So in that time, I'm going to basically wrap up with a key comment. And I'll try to say this in the best way I can and not get in as much trouble as I can avoid. Many people are upset with the outcome of the last election. And I'll suggest one of the, I think, significant factors that contributed to the outcome was, I think one party was pretty clear addressing real obvious problems that people knew and could see with their own eyes. And another party was less rigorous doing that. And I think when we ignore what people know and understand, we risk persistence. And I think what I'm saying about in this whole presentation is Energy Star is probably one of the best examples of good government we can find, but we have opportunities to do better, to bring back the John Hoffman insane innovation and a little bit of risk taking and just amazing ability to pivot and do things at the speed of business. So I think the more we can make the program so defensible and tighten up its value and how it works, I think everyone will be better off because this program deserves to be around in perpetuity. I hope this makes sense. I'm afraid people might be upset with things I've said, but Mike, I'm ready to take some questions.
All right, Sam, buckle in, buddy. We got questions. I I do that just because I wanted to cut some of the potential tension or anything like that. Actually, we do have questions, but I think you're going to kind of enjoy it because for some they resonated with the history of it, and we're going to ask a couple questions about that, and then we're also going to talk a little bit about kind of future thoughts too. Um, so, in regards to historical, let's go historical first. Um, and by the way, some of the people that you mentioned are on the meeting here with us. So you mentioned Darren Waschek, he's on here with us. Another name
Okay.
you didn't mention, but well, Eric Whirling's with us too. Um, but there was a question that came in from Connor. Is John Hoffman still around? Is he retired? Is he still alive? Like, can you talk a little bit about some of the people that you mentioned? Do you stay in touch with them at all, or what do you know about their whereabouts?
Sadly, John Hoffman got into a little bit of a tangle with some very, very senior leadership at EPA. And like I said, he left after at least within a year and a half after I was there. Probably one of the biggest disappointment in my life was that John left EPA and I didn't have more time to work with him. Sadly, he passed about 6 or 7 years after he left EPA, and it was a big loss. And sadly, he's not around to keep uh, tapping into his amazing wisdom. So, but what an amazing person he was.
Gotcha. Um, we'll stick with the history for a minute. Do you remember who coined the term HERS or home energy rating system?
Hers was developed ironically for existing homes. And DOE led a major initiative. I don't know if they're the first and coined it. There's a lot of things going on. But the first time I became aware of it, it was a DOE program. And that's where HERO, Home Energy Rating Organization, was one of the first rating groups I knew about. There was Energy Rated Homes of America at the very beginning. And then ResNet was formed when they came to us for a grant. Steve Baden and two gentlemen who brought Steve in from Alaska came into our office, and we gave them a sizable grant that enabled Steve to just do the amazing things he's done with HERS and ResNet. So, but the first I was aware of HERS was with DOE in the 90s, and it was there primarily for existing homes. And then what made it become an industry is new homes, because Energy Star said, this is a horse we're going to ride. This is attach our wagon to. So that's how the history that I know about hers.
And Eric contributed too that Ron Hughes was involved with that term, but he also passed away a couple of years ago as well.
Ah, Eric's one of the amazing people need to talk to as well.
Could you describe some of the challenges you faced early on from the HERS industry in implementing the Energy Star certified home?
Oh, we were locking horns all the time, not because they were bad or I was bad or they were good and I was good, but because we were both under such tremendous pressure. I mentioned Hoffman was pretty clear. The day you arrive, he's told you you're out the door if you don't get A, B, C, D done. I've never seen government like that before. And the HERS industry was just struggling to get a basic foothold so that they had a viable association and a viable way to attract people into the industry. And so if I wanted to do something that was perceived as reducing the income flow and business opportunity for the raters, but making less burden for a builder, we would be locking horns. I had to get builders into the program. They had to make sure the raters would want to even become a rater. And it was because everyone had the right interest in mind, but we were at conflict sometimes. But this is where David Lee was so amazing, because David really stepped in to be the kind of the key point person to manage our relationship with the HERS industry. And it was just his success. He doesn't get credit for it. There was a moment where I think he was being criticized by the HERS industry and not shown respect for their existence would not be there but for David Lee. I think that's been mended since then. But that's what we had. We had people who brought all these critical pieces that complemented each other. But the rating industry and us were tremendously collaborative, and the partnership was amazing. But we had our rough moments. It's just the way it should be.
Yeah. Wanted to make sure to insert a compliment here. Our friend Robbie Schwartz wants to thank you for all that you've done. The Energy Star version 2 and the thermal enclosure checklist transformed the Denver market with the Stapleton redevelopment. So he wanted to pass
Robbie's
along
always
his sentiments.
generous, and he's an amazing. He's amazing what he did in the HERS industry. So we owe him a lot too.
Yeah. Um, I wanted to get to a couple of kind of forward-looking things now, if we could. So there was a question, are you familiar with the American Society for Quality? They have a construction or a quality manager certification. They're the ANSI partner for quality management standards in the US, and optimization is a part of what they're advocating or talking about.
No, I'm not familiar with them. I'm trying to figure out if that's part of the Housing Innovation Research Lab or it's a separate group. You know, Housing Innovation Research Lab as a whole quality assurance program for builders and set of protocols and uh, ways they work with the industry. I don't know about the success of those programs, and you know, I'm like just tangentially aware, so I won't have anything meaningful to probably say about them.
Okay. Um, so there's a question about towards the end of your presentation, you were talking about, okay, what can we do? Where can this go? But Matthew wanted to ask a question. Can you talk a little bit about the statutory requirements that are placed upon EPA or DOE when implementing or managing the Energy Star program? And let me clarify this question. Would federal law, would or wouldn't federal law prohibit privatization or discontinuation? You can move to a different agency, but do you think that there may be some violation of some sort of federal law if it went the private route or it was discontinued?
Again, this is outside my pay grade. This, you know, all this. I know the legislation that was used to create the uh, climate partnership division and Energy Star, all those things, how it got created. But I don't know again, are you locked in forever or can another administration kind of change and cancel the programs? So I can't answer that. Um, all I can say is that in the current political climate, it just seems that if um, you want to shut down programs, you can shut them down. It's what it seems to be.
Okay. Um, so let's go back to something that Robbie brought up. He agrees there are ways to simplify things, but his comment is you get what you inspect, not what you expect. So the SIPs, the foam, it doesn't always ensure performance. And his other comment was if you want to quantify the performance, you need to do the testing.
I so respect Robbie. I can't even explain how much respect I have for him. Um, so here's where I just recommend testing both options. I think the 80-20 rule, there are two issues here. One is the 80-20 rule. The one is how much quality control are we getting with the existing system? And first, the 80-20 rule is I'm going to suggest like 90% of the SIP homes are 1.5 ACH 50 or less. Am I going to worry about the other 10% and have all 100% go through a diagnostic and measurement protocol just to try and worry about that? Especially knowing that I don't believe the existing protocols with a complete HERS verification can meet those thresholds as well. I think there's a lot that gets through the HERS quality assurance process that is less than optimal. Um, just look at all those details that I showed you for the Energy Star program, all those checklists and reviews and quality installation requirements and protocols for HVAC. And yet a rater is getting for a production builder maybe $400 or $500 a house, maybe 600. And how much time does that leave to oversee maybe 40 pages of 6 font notes and specifications and requirements and testing? And so we don't know how much quality assurance we're getting from the current system. So when you look at these homes, if there is a problem, I'm going to suggest that it's visibly obvious. You know, you can see the daylight through a SIP panel if the seams, but yet a SIP panel goes in with belts and suspenders. You have two panels are joined together. They put foam, they spray foam on the insulation of one panel, then they join it, and then there are two splines on either side with further air barrier and leakage blocking, and then they'll kind of tape over the joint as well. I mean, it's just really hard to get a leaky SIP home. Yeah, there are conditions and designs and things can fall through the cracks, but I think there are visual inspections that can give the same or better results than we do blower door testing framed homes. Or at least that's a hypothesis. I'm saying let's test the hypothesis. If there are 300 plus thousand Energy Star homes certified last year, uh, and do we need to do 350,000 diagnostics for air leakage, including the homes that already are almost guaranteed to be airtight enough? And if they're not airtight enough, I'd submit that at least it'd be visibly obvious. And more important, I believe the existing system, we don't know how good the quality assurance is. I don't think it's ever been subject to the kind of rigor of quality assurance verification outside the industry looking in that other products are subject to. So,
So our friend Ted Clifton brings up something interesting, Sam. If you're in a city, it can be relatively inexpensive to get a blower door test done because of proximity. Other places, it could be a very multi-hour drive one way to get a rater there. And so his comment is, we got to recognize this difficulty and a default option might be worthwhile.
Ted's very thoughtful, and that's a great comment. Yeah.
Um, Another kind of recommendation, if we could, from Eric Whirling. It goes to the final point that you were making, Sam. He suggests that people check out Ezra Klein's book Abundance, regarding what government could do better. It builds on the final point you made in a very practical and optimistic way. So a plug for Ezra
Yeah.
Klein's book.
Great recommendation. Great recommendation.
Let's get to a couple other questions though here. So you brought up alternative metrics. Could it be tied to something like the EU's EPCs?
Exactly. Exactly,
Okay.
Mike. Yeah.
Okay.
And there are a lot of things Europe does that just seem smarter to me, and the things we do that seem in the US that seem smarter than Europe does. But some things that they do really smart, for instance, are the EPDs, the energy labels in Europe, the ABCF, and the way they implement it. It's just incredible. Every home, a transaction has to have a label. And so it's really effective. We can learn so much from what they're doing. And it's amazing how little we build on what's working in Europe here and vice versa. Just to give another example on a completely different field, when France does nuclear power plants, they build in the entire country all power plants with one system, one set of parts, one set of trained, skilled crews that manage and keep them running properly. And it's just so much more cost effective than having all the plants in the US are built with different systems, and you need different parts, you need different crews. And so the whole operation in Europe, they figure out how to be faster, better, cheaper, providing power. And we don't copy each other and learn from each other enough. So that's just what I'm saying. Let's build on what's working.
So Alex brings up a question. What are your thoughts on the potential of the industry and the home building industry to position itself as a short-term solution to meeting load demand from data centers? Because if we're building more efficient homes at scale, shouldn't this free up power for those kind of facilities then rather than building out more new power generation?
Much more so in existing homes than new homes, and it depends on where the homes are being built and so forth, and how many homes are built. So possibly, I don't know the answer, but by far, I think you talk about the big prize. We look at the inefficiency of the existing housing stock. 85% was built before 2000, when the codes were 70, 80% less rigorous or more. Um, our big opportunity in that case would be existing homes, and that's what I work on with Oak Ridge National Lab, kind of a pathway to how we can scale existing homes, and whether the savings from that scaling is used for data centers or just to reduce fossil fuel power plants. I mean, there are a lot of ways it can be leveraged for good benefits, but it's one approach I guess you could take. Yeah.
All right. Well, I want to thank everybody for attending today. Thank you, Sam, for not just the outlook, but also the history of it. I got a chance to communicate with a few people while this was going on, and they very much appreciated the historical side of this. And so I thank you both, for the outlook looking forward, but also the historical side of it, and all the
Thanks.
wonderful questions and comments and compliments that came in from everybody. We really do appreciate you being with us today. Um, that kind of concludes today's seminar, but I got to make sure to thank Panasonic, Healthy Indoor Living Solutions, for their generous sponsorship of this webinar. We very much appreciate them. Our next webinar is actually going to take place in about 2 weeks. It's going to happen on July 9th. We're going to be joined by Chris Magwood as he discusses the manufacturing of building products from upcycled biomass. And that's going to start at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, just like this one did here. Until next time, have a safe, wonderful 4th of July. Make sure to check those tires and stay healthy and take care, everyone. So long, everyone.